Sure, it's recording. Okay, welcome to Millicent Unplugged. We'll give a few minutes for participants to jump on. And this month, we have our guests, Kathy McCoy and Anita Moss, joining us. And I would like to pause for just a moment and offer a land acknowledgement that here at the Millicent Rogers Museum, we are located on ancestral lands of the Tiwa-speaking people, known today as the Red Willow people of Taos Pueblo. We strive to deepen our relationship with the Red Willow people through collaboration while acknowledging and honoring the very complex history of the Red Willow people, past, present, and future generations. We express gratitude to this land and to the Taos Pueblo elders and ancestors who have stewarded this land since time immemorial. So welcome. We are talking tonight about the Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon wildfire and some of the experiences that these ladies are kind enough to come and share what's going on, a little over a year later. For those people not familiar, the Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon fire of 2022 is the largest wildfire in New Mexico's history that started on April 6th in 2022. When Kathy visited the museum last, I think it was September, Kathy.
It was.
Started talking and just kind of inspired by the gallery setting, Kathy started sharing some of what she was going through currently, still in the aftermath of those fires, which led to an idea of sharing stories and trying to let people in the community and our audience understand that this is an ongoing process and there are still people struggling. And so Kathy had her friend Anita that she thought would want to have that conversation. I said, "Oh, Millicent Unplugged. That's let's do this." So that's why we're here tonight. So Kathy McCoy began her love affair of the Southwest in 1977 when she arrived in Flagstaff, Arizona, to attend Northern Arizona University. Kathy had just completed a 3-year tour with the United States Army in Berlin, Germany. She lived in Arizona for 10 years, birthed 3 children, and earned a BFA from Northern Arizona University in sculpture. She went on to start graduate work in anthropology. Kathy's journey took a U-turn back to the South, where she had been raised. She became the founding executive director for the Mora County Heritage Museums in Monroeville, Alabama. Monroeville is the home of Harper Lee, Truman Capote, Mark Childress, and Cynthia Tucker. I think that's a whole nother conversation and show. She spent 16 years as director and was also the founding director of the international touring production of To Kill a Mockingbird. During that time, Kathy discovered the Mora Valley of New Mexico, and once again, her passion for the Southwest was fired up. Kathy purchased 30 acres of land on the side of a mountain outside of Ladue and created a paradise. I know you pronounce it differently in Mora, but I'm saying Ladue and Taos.
Ladukes.
The Dukes, right? In 2022, she lost paradise when the devastating wildfires from Hermit's Peak and Calf Canyon met and ran the ridge and into the canyon next to her property, destroying her home and all the trees on her property except for 4 acres. Today, she is continuing to try and save her land from the ravages of floods and mudslides. Kathy is strengthened by the strong and indomitable people of her valley and the villages that surround her. They have suffered much more loss than she. They have lost primary homes, family homes, cattle businesses, hunting and agricultural businesses. Many have not been compensated by the government who started both fires. She would like to tell her story, but more than that, some of the stories of her valley and the unbelievable resilience and fortitude of the people of northern New Mexico. Welcome, Kathy.
Thank
And
you.
Anita, welcome to the program. Anita has been a community and nonprofit developer and organizer for over 30 years. Her passion is all things creative, painting, quilting, gardening, cooking, and teaching these skills as well. Anita and her husband were greatly affected by the Hermit's Peak Half Canyon fire. Silver linings are a must for her. Her husband was home from his overseas career, which was a huge relief, as his degree is in wildfire land management. He spent time as a hotshot here in New Mexico and was an engine captain for the National Forest Service. He and Anita stayed through the fire, working with crews to find neighbors' properties. After their home and studios burned, her husband continued to feed the neighbors' animals as well as their own until all that could came home. Anita is back to growing food, creating, and teaching. The fire was a unique teacher and challenge, as everything inevitably changes. Hopefully, growth comes in some form with that change. Thank you, ladies, for being with us. And Sarah, would you like to shift us into the conversation?
Oh, I sure would. I am absolutely awed that you two are willing to come on and speak of this, if for no other reason that the emotional pictures going through your head, I mean, just the pictures on the news were completely awful. And so it's small geography. Mora is between Las Vegas, New Mexico, and Taos, about an hour from Taos. Your altitude is about 7,000 feet. So even though you're a valley, sort of, you are on the eastern side in basically foothills of the Sangre de Cristos. And certainly not a small community, and yet by metropolitan standards, yes, you would be considered somewhat out of the way. And your people, the land is their livelihood in many cases. And of course, you're both artists, and so the land is your inspiration. So with that introduction, Kathy, you know a lot about the history of the neighborhood. Give us the précis, because it goes back a long way.
It does. Well, Mora is Spanish land grant country, and the Mora Valley was really settled in the 1830s and 40s by people from Taos. They were granted Spanish land grants, came into the valley. It was rough going because there were already some other folks living in that valley, and those were the Apaches. But they did establish homes there and worked their way into my valley. My valley is the home of Ladue, or Ladukes, as we mention it, in our neck of the woods, as we say, Cibaya Valley, and which means little onion in Spanish. And this valley was founded by Antoine Ladue, also from Taos. He made that his Spanish land grant and built a home there. He passed there, and his children, descendants, went on to, believe it or not, establish Trinidad, Colorado. So our valley of Mora and my village of Ladukes were early on very important trade routes. They also, the people of Mora Valley, traded with the Comanches. They went through the pass at Cleveland, New Mexico, went out on the high plains and met the Comanches and traded with them. And that story right there establishes, I think, a lot to be said about the brave, brave people of the valleys. They came into that valley when there was no, what we call today, civilization, and established their homes, their farms, their ranches, and created quite a mercantile business there too. No railroad, nothing. And my valley, as I said, was founded by the French, the Basque, and the Spanish. When I first moved to the valley and established my small cabin there in the early 2000s, there was still a lady that lived down the road, very old, who spoke Basque. So it was a remarkable neighborhood to be in, composed of many people. We had crypto Jews who lived in my valley. They're buried in the cemetery with the Star of David on their tombstones. So it was a real mix of cultures. The Apaches stayed and lived amongst the settlers there. Several of my friends have DNA they have done that, of course, has Native American in it. And they did not leave the area until the 1880s, when they were forced to move to reservation in Dulce, New Mexico. So you had just this unbelievable cultural event happening. Now, when the Americans took New Mexico, the people of Mora Valley stood up to them and actually engaged in a battle in Mora, where they killed the captain that was sent from Fort Union to, quote, quell the natives, came back in and literally they decimated the town with cannon fire from the pass that goes up to Leduc. Even today in Mora Valley, people will find cannonballs in their backyards or up on their land from that battle, and that in the 1840s. So the valley has an unbelievable history. It created a culture of tough resilience. They depend on each other in that valley. They are very community oriented. And when you look at their history, you can see why they had to be to survive.
That's quite a note. Of course, the West is famous for our historians about Civil War, and that was one of the few things that might be known by people, just a bit of miscellaneous information. The two battles of Mora between Mexicans and the settlers who came and decided that they wanted to not join Mexico.
But no, not join America. It was Americans. When Kearney came into that Las Vegas plaza and said, "You are Americans now," well, the folks up in Mora didn't take to that. They still considered themselves Spanish and did not want to be Americans. As a matter of fact, one of the Mora natives ended up being a troublemaker and was one of the people who led the rebellion in Taos. One of the principal rebels came out of Mora Valley. That, of course, led to the fire, to the burning down of the church, and many natives dying and Spanish dying in Taos. Yes, I hate to tell you, but we're the home of the rebels, and they always have been. And then they didn't want to fight the Comanches. They knew the Comanches and what they could do. So they said, okay, we can't beat them. We'll become traders with them. And that's what they did. They traded with the Comanches for 50, 60, 70 years. Comancheros.
Early detente, most satisfactory.
Exactly. That's very good. Early detente. Very good.
So your point being, Kathy, that this history and the people, the robust people that live in the valley, that's what you've seen shining as that silver lining since then, and provided the resilience and the fortitude that from facing the fires.
Exactly.
That's what Anita is talking about when she speaks of silver lining. And there's something about that Western sense of identity, fortitude, resilience. We keep using those words, but that's part of what it's all about. Not that other people aren't interesting. It's just that there's this strong streak in all of us who love the West. Anita, when did you come first, or are you native born in the area?
Well, actually, it's funny that you asked that, because I was just about to jump in here. We moved here 22 years ago, and my husband and I were actually born in Minnesota. And when I say the word, people are like, "Oh, that's where she's from, Minnesota." We are, and when we came down here, our elder neighbors he said, well, most people who come here, they stay about 2 years. And their romantic ideal of the West is out the window when you have as much snow as you're going to get in Minnesota. You have winds in the spring. You need to cut your firewood. You have issues. And he met us in July. We'd already put up our first woodshed. And he says, well, I guess you'll all be staying. And yeah, and we did. So those elder neighbors, they had to evacuate during the fires. And when we get back to the resiliency after the fires and how things have had silver linings and difficulties. So we lost our house, my studios, my greenhouses. We're building a new house, and that barely made it. And that's, you know, that's another thing. But is my husband and I were able to get some help. One of the things that people around here needed was the firewood. So I'll go back to that woodshed. So most of us cut our own firewood. And my husband and I grew up logging family type stuff in Minnesota on and off. I mean, you have Minnesota, you need a fireplace. So anyway, now those older neighbors, a lot of the trees that they could cut are all burned. And I don't know if people understand how difficult it is to cut burned trees. You think that that's a blessing. Oh, look, you know, we've got all these trees. No. So we've had down here, I think it was a 23, 24-year-old young man who was trying to make a living and cutting all this dead or burned firewood. He wound up in the hospital, not able to breathe because he basically had tar in his lungs.
Oh.
And
That's
so exactly. So now my older neighbor decided, you know, he's 87. He's going to go ahead and cut his own firewood again, cut one tree, and said that's just not going to work. And so silver lining is we lost our house. So we were one of the families that were on a list for free firewood. And my husband and I gratefully can decide whatever we want to do with whatever is given to us so we can share. And I think that's what we need. At first, I didn't feel that we're that destitute. The world is in chaos, as we all know right now. And I felt bad taking any help. And that's one of the things that you guys are going to see in this fire is that a lot of people are like, well, it's not that bad. Somebody else is worse off than I am.
Right.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So I was on the recovery team for a while, and it got to be too much when it's that close to you. And I'm used to making things happen, and I couldn't make things happen with the government. Whole nother story. But back to the firewood, I finally just had to tell myself and my husband that it's okay to accept help. So those folks also lived off grid. They barely saved their home. They lost their freezer. My husband and I stayed during the fires, and we went around in our canyon and emptied 7 homes, refrigerators and freezers, because they shut the electricity off and everything was rotting. So we were going from home to home to do that. Well, our senior neighbors lost their freezer. So another opportunity, I was asked if I needed a chest freezer. Well, I didn't feel like I really needed one. However, my older folks who live up the way are off grid and needed a new freezer. So now that's in my walk-in closet. That's still not sheetrocked. And we share a freezer. And so when we're talking about how you make things happen and the resiliency, or just being kind and thoughtful to each other. So some charities did come in and assisted with that stuff. And then I felt we needed to say yes and help others that maybe didn't lose their home, but they lost a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a balance, and it's a little dance that we're doing almost a year and a half later.
That's
So
another
that's-
Western thing, what you're just mentioning, the reticence to ask for help, saying, we're not all that bad, we can manage. But should someone else need help, they're right there. And I think that's a terribly important point about your community, but I would say that's, well, I'd like to think that was all of us.
I agree with you. So watching the news today, like I said, I could not believe the chaos, yet we're living still in this burned community behind us. It's just black sticks, but we're so grateful that we have this and we have our neighbors, and that's a common core value for all of us.
I'd like
I
to
think
jump in a little bit, Kathy. Sorry, just for a
Yeah.
second, because Anita, you touched on such a valuable example of one comment that I read was the culture, what a burned down culture. So people don't necessarily know this, but in northern New Mexico, firewood, burning wood, heating your home with wood is a way of life.
yes, that's exactly.
And so
right.
what you said touched on such a major point, that because your home burned, you were eligible for free firewood, but then you've got neighbors who perhaps did not lose their home, but because, almost 350,000 acres were burned, there's no firewood. Now, I know that starting in July, and this is partly from teaching preschool, and I just want to explain this so people can understand the depth of it. Toddlers here, they play going to get wood. It is such a way of life.
That's
Families
exactly right.
go get wood. This is something you do. Oh, we're going to get wood. It's a family outing. It's something you do all summer so that you have wood for the year.
That's
So
right.
thank you for bringing that up, Anita.
And don't forget that we are speaking of the fire in the late spring, not this year, but last year. And so we are approaching, well, we've passed a year and a half, and there is still a terrific need in the area. And you need a bunch of wood because it gets chilly at 7,000 feet.
And the other problem, not only for their personal use, but these people supplemented their living expenses, their livelihood with selling wood. And also, the forests were closed after the fire. They had to sell their cows. The cows that did not die. These people had cows, horses, llamas, alpacas on their land, and could not even, during the forced evacuations, they had to leave them. And so they come back, they lost some, they did not lose all their herds, but then you can't put it out on BLM land when BLM land is burned down. There was nothing for those cows to graze. So we had a young man who had started a business in Mora where you picked I need a half a cow at this date. I need it slaughtered and cut up into this fashion. He made his whole living that way. He had to sell all his cows. He couldn't feed a herd of cows. He had no grass to put them on anymore. So it just kept rolling on. Another occupation in our valley, very private. Our men in the Mora Valley are hunters. That we hunt elk and we hunt deer. And they would lead hunting trips. People would come from Texas and all over, from the Southlands to hunt, and they were hunting guides. This is over. This cannot happen now. We can't hunt on scarred, burned land. The elk herds have moved. I had an elk herd on my land. They've told me, my neighbors were excited the other day and sent me a picture of footprints. We think there are elk back up on your land after a year and a half. Of course, my land now is destitute, but it has grass on it. So I guess Anita would say that is the silver lining. But I tell you that the ramifications of the land, these people their relationship with the land is tight, and they depend on the wood. They depend on the animals on that land. For some of them, depend on the animals, on the elk and the deer, for their own meat. There are many a household in Mora Valley that has a freezer full of venison, I can tell you, or did have, but that is not happening.
Can I add to that, Kathy?
Yeah, go ahead.
Um,
Come on in.
That's one of the biggest complaints that we heard over and over is people here had 2 to 3 freezers. When FEMA came in, or the insurance company, they would not replace any of that meat. At the most, it was like a couple $100. Now,
Yeah.
the electricity was shut off, so that's not a natural disaster. That's on the electric company, so then they wouldn't reimburse that. I just went to the grocery store up in Angel Fire. It's $18 a pound for ground elk. And those senior neighbors I talked about, they were gifted 2 elk. And they're like, oh, Anita, can we cut it up? And you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know if you all know what it's like to cut up 1 elk. It was huge. So we have all of this before the fires lost all that elk. That's thousands of dollars in meat you cannot replace. And we're not the only ones. That's almost everybody I know had elk, or it's common here to buy half a cow. A half a cow, if you get a good deal, is $1,000. You don't get that replaced at all. FEMA's not going to give it to you. And on top of that, as a business person, it's not that you lost what you had, it's replacement value. And that's something that is really important to discuss in here. Is we had COVID, and then we had the fire, and we're in a depressed community anyway. Mora County is in the top 3 to 10 counties that is the most impoverished in the United States. That's tremendous. And then you get a national, you know, the federal government can't understand how people live here. It just is not in their wheelhouse. FEMA is used to hurricanes. They're not used to this. So when these people who are able to exist by being frugal, by hunting their own food, by, you know, getting firewood for themselves that costs next to nothing when you do it yourself, that's gone. And the replacement value is tremendous. That's what I have to say on that.
And I
Exactly.
would imagine that there is a lack among residents of sufficient insurance, maybe not any insurance at all, to cover any of these terrible losses. As you said, it's all things that people made of their own hands. And that's what is so hard to quantify and put a dollar figure on it.
Well, thanks for bringing that up, because that's something that really just irks me. Is we had paid off our house and we're trying to build a new one. It took 4 years for us to get this shell of a house up. So we actually had a foundation and everything. People here who want to try and build now, it took us 4 years. And we had to do most of the work ourselves. So where are they going to find the labor to do it? And then when you talk about the insurance, I was debating whether or not I should keep the insurance. My insurance agent said, if you drop it, you can't get new insurance. And as it is, that they only cover maybe 20% of what you have. Most people were uninsurable. So for outsiders, and I call this fire shaming, people who don't understand the culture and don't understand the whole of the situation. Well, why didn't you have insurance? Well, because most insurance companies won't insure you. It's uninsurable. We were in a 9 out of 10 hazard zone for insurance. And for me, they didn't settle my insurance for 16 months, and it's only a tiny portion of what we lost. And so other folks probably just weren't even able to get it.
And the other thing about Mora is it's family land that's been passed down for a couple hundred years. I know of a friend of mine, hardworking woman, just recently widowed, who had 2 mobile homes sitting on family land. Her brother had his house and her other brother had his house. She lost both mobile homes. FEMA said, we're not going to give you anything because that land title is not in your name. So instead, they gave her a little one of those little 18-foot RVs to live in. And then 6 months later, they came and got it too and said, you need to find a place to live. Now that's a true story. So the insurance scam, I call it the insurance. I was lucky. I had insurance that paid off on my little casita. But I realized early on, and Anita and I discussed this, FEMA came in and said, we're going to give you 25% of of your total loss. Now, they allocated $4 billion for this fire, but they were going to give 25% of your total loss. And that's when many of us decided, you know what, we're going to do better than that. We're going to get a lawyer. And that's what many of us have done. We have filed our notice of losses. They've been mine has been accepted by FEMA, and now we're filing for a proof of loss. And that's what's so important. And I talked to many of my friends in that valley and said, do not sign and accept this 25%. They also would only give per home, no matter what the value, the maximum you could get from FEMA for your home was $37,900. Needless to say, there were many people that had to seek legal advice.
To the civilian, this is an extraordinarily ridiculous scenario. It would be laughable if it weren't so deathly serious, and it's livelihood, it's well-being, it's mental, it's physical, it's everything here. And of course, remembering again that any settlement hasn't really happened, and it's still a year and a half. People need, we all think of FEMA as they're going to be right there and you're going to have something and you're going to be supported within hours, days maybe, and it's nothing. And while we don't want to dwell upon this, because of course we're speaking of our people who make their own way and create something out of the silver lining out of absolutely nothing. I mean, the pictures of the forest are extraordinary. It's matchsticks. There is not a leaf, not a pine needle, not a blade of grass, just black one after another. And I
want to jump in. I want to jump in on this just a little bit, just to contextualize it, in case, future viewers to the recording might be wondering, well, what does this have anything to do at all with the museum? And so circling back to that, I want to talk about the day that Kathy came into the museum, and I just happened to be up there in the lobby and we ran into each other. And so one of the aspects of this also that I'd like for you to speak to is the nature of the small villages, the land, the valley, the people who are living on, family land for centuries, and the adobe structures. Because again, people outside of our region, the Southwest is so unique that I think it's important for people to understand that, for example, an adobe structure that is, you take even the structure that the museum is right now, an adobe structure built in the 40s, right? So it's built from the dirt that the museum is, on, that the museum sits on. And with the fires, the actual earth, the soil, the land was burned and chemically changed so that if people wanted to rebuild the adobe structures, they can't, because of the chemical changes in the burned earth. That's significant because that's again a way of life. So the museum, when Kathy came in, I'm going to share this and then I'll be quiet and let you ladies talk. One of the things she told me that was just like, oh my gosh, I had not thought about that part, was then the floods that came. And what my understanding now is happening is that those of you whose land was decimated by the fire, now with the floods, you're having all kinds of things washing down every time there's a rain, such as pottery and ancestral objects.
Well,
And so
this
this I would love for you to talk about, because again, another aspect.
and I'll talk to you briefly about it, because my land has become kind of a microcosm. It's funny. We were my friends and some of my workers were out on the land in September, and we were finding all kinds of things. My land is about 7,200 feet to 7,800 feet. It goes all the way up to the top of the mountain, and I am next to Tomas Canyon. Tomas Canyon drains every spring onto my land into my lower pond, which is now a lake. And we have created new dam structures. I have a upper pond and a lower pond. Now, what's important about this, and I guess this is why the USDA people wanted to come to my land in June after the fire, and it was still smoldering, is that water coming out of Tomas Canyon now has nothing to stop it. And the water coming from the top of the mountain down on my land has nothing to stop it. And it runs into the valley. It crosses the road, starting to wash out the road and into other houses in the valley. So we realized immediately we had to somehow slow down the water. Slowing down the water would save the adobe structures that are down the road, would save the house next door that a doctor had recently purchased, and he fought the fires. Literally, they had to drag him off his land to save his house. But so we realized that it was kind of a point of a spear area. It was really strange when you realized it. During this period of time, I was there. We've come out multiple times now and stayed weeks, trying to put up culverts, trying to stop the water. My brother-in-law was an old engineer for the Corps of Engineers. He said, all right, get in there, put some, you've got to put stone in there. It washed the stone out. We came back, but we're just trying to really save. My place was gone, trying to save a little bit of the land at the bottom to put something else on to live in and to come to. But we wanted to also save those houses down the road and save the road, Highway 94. In the meantime, during this period of we're not even thinking about just trying to save the land and what was below it and next to it, we started having all kinds of I can't even explain it. We found shards, we found flint projectiles, a scraper. I have a scraper right now in 3 pieces. It's probably, I would say, 5 inches wide. And I had someone look at it back in South Alabama, who of course knows flint and that type of thing. He said, that is old, and I'm not talking recent history. So now we have all this cultural coming down. I knew on my property, I knew I had an elk herd, and I bet that elk herd has been there for 1,000 years crossing, and I knew. I'd looked out of my door one day after a rain and picked up projectile points, and I found all kinds of items. And I think that I had a natural spring on that property, and I think they have hunted there for thousands of years. So Tomas Canyon also has a natural stream that runs into my land. So now every time you go out, I mean, I'm out there. I know the bulldozer, the backhoe men and the bulldozer, oh God, here she comes. I'll say, guys, don't go over there, because I was just out there yesterday and I found 3 pieces. Try to move around there. Let me go ahead and sift through this area before you start moving land, earth again. But it is unbelievable. I think that probably we will never live where we lived on that land. We'll have to be down by the road now. And all we can think about now is just saving the land from washing down into the valley onto other people's homes. I mean, that's where we're at. We're not in la la land about we're going to be back up on our mountain. We know now our situation. Silver lining, Anita, because Anita always finds the silver lining. Silver lining is I've got hollyhocks that are now 10 feet high. They look like people up on my site.
Oh,
And grass, the most unbelievable grass you've ever seen. They took 100 dead trees down, and we're going to leave the others, but it took 100 dead trees down, and so the grasses are like, it's like the savannah or something. So it's a whole different place now, and I guess that's what we have to realize with my good friends out there who've been through so much. I didn't want to say anything, and some of them had lost ancestral homes and lost occupations, and they said to me, "Oh, Kathy, you're going to have a great view," and that became the joke. Every time I'd FaceTime, they go, "Oh, Kathy, the view is going to be unbelievable." I said, "Yeah, there's nothing blocking it."
Kathy, let me add to that, because I've worked with our local women's group, and we brought in the soil conservation folks so that people can understand what's going on a little bit better. The fire that came through my home came from the top, it came from the side, and it came from the bottom. It was literally a tornado with fire in the sky. When it's that hot, it sterilizes the ground. And so this summer and last fall, we had helicopters over and over seeding and dropping mold, and people are like, well, that's waste. It's only going to have a 10% chance of it even seeding. Well, we need a 10% chance, because when it's sterilized, what's going to grow? And the trees aren't going to come back unless you have soil that is a kind of bit healthy, and then you go and put the trees in one by one. So realistically, we just have a changed landscape, and we have to look at that and go, okay, so now what's next? However, I was reflecting on this a few days ago. My husband and I went to the top of our mountain many, many times, and it has just gotten drier and drier. And we knew that one lightning strike was going to be a hot mess. And it wasn't the lightning strike, it was others. And I can go on about, the folks that came in to fight the fires. My husband, as I said, was a hot shot. We fed firefighters for 2.5 weeks. Thankfully, we did. We took probably 60 plus pounds of hamburger out of our freezers. That was lost anyway. You get to talk to them. A lot of them were new, and they'd never been on something like this. And their controlled burns, they weren't, a lot of them had not had experience in controlled burns. And when it came over the mountain, some of these places, like our own, I think, were just collateral damage. They knew that if it lasted, it lasted. It didn't. It wasn't assets like they talked about in Angel Fire. What happened in Mora, I know, was because we are a very sparse community. The entire county is 4,500 people. There's not a lot of homes that have quote unquote asset values. And then, well, I don't want to get political about it. I'm just saying that fortunately I live in a community where people are still like, well, I'm not that bad off, even though I feel like they weren't helped to.
Well, that brings up something else, Anita, that we need to let everyone know. The people who fought the fires around our villages and saved the villages and saved a lot of homes were the local people. You know that, exactly. Anita. Everybody, I mean, they got on there. First of all, there's nobody else in the entire world that can drive a bulldozer or a backhoe better than the men of these valleys. I'm telling you. And they got on their own equipment, and they saved Cleveland. They saved Cleveland, New Mexico. They saved Ladukes. They were up. They had to come up on my land. I was a half a mile back. Those men were all from there. And one of them, a personal friend of mine, told me, he said, Kathy, these people were so upset they couldn't save my little place. And I'm like, for God's sake, I'm just glad you didn't get killed on it. They said that, and you were right, that triangle, that's the way mine was. Except mine wasn't coming from the bottom. Mine came top and side. They said the ground trembled and it sounded like 50 helicopters above them. And they still kept trying to save my place. I'm thanking God every day it burned and they did not. Because they literally ran, dropped their equipment, and jumped into their trucks. It's praying that the rubber wasn't burning off of the tires to get down off that mountain. So these were all people from Mora, from Ladue, from Cleveland, from Holman. These men saved their villages. We didn't have the firefighters like the Angel Fire did. You know that, Anita. There was a lot of local people that came in.
Well, so Kathy, let me add this to people who are going to watch it in the future. There is not one paid firefighter in our entire county. Everything is volunteer. The second thing is the electric company and the telephone company paid their guys to be on dozers to fight fires. That was awesome. And then we have a tremendous amount of construction workers here between dirt work and logging and whatever. Everybody was on their stuff helping. So it was an unnaturally huge fire, 70-mile-an-hour plus winds.
Yes.
It's almost hurricane winds, and it was almost every day. It was insane. And then, like, my husband and I are at our house, and you have no cell service because the cell tower
burned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can't contact anybody. You don't get any news. I remember us sitting in the truck hoping to get the radio channel, and the people in Las Vegas, which is only 40 minutes away, they didn't have the same information of what's in this valley. So in the mountains, the entire weather system is completely different. My husband had talked to the fire supervisor. We were 3 weeks, and he says, whatever they're telling you the winds are going to do is wrong. And the guy, after it was a week, he said, you're right. They come in the exact opposite direction from what they were being told in Las Vegas. So the communication was different. I don't want to get into this negativity. It's just, I hope it's really a lesson. And some of the firefighters, the senior firefighters here, said this will be something that will teach our younger firefighters for generations.
Yes, I've heard that too.
And
I've heard that too.
Yeah. So let's learn from it. We're getting to almost be done with this. I just do want us all to really be grateful for where we're at. And think about those folks who are still living in campers and trailers and so on.
And there are a lot of people still living in RVs. I know of living in barns, living in their barn, that after they have put some utilities into their barn, that they can live there while they try to rebuild. People living in little RVs, bigger RVs. People not living on their land at all now. They're having to live with family members in Albuquerque or Santa Fe.
And thank you, Kathy. Let me add to that. So when you're talking about the difficulty here in our little county, we have one place that has kind of a motel type of thing. People asked, why are you living in your house? We had no electricity and no running water. We had no toilet. And they're like, oh, well, at least your new house was saved. Yes, we are grateful, because if we had to go and live in a hotel in Las Vegas, go back and forth and try to get your place up to par, how long is that going to take?
Exactly.
That just and the stress of it, and then you're having to eat out. You can't just stay at home. It's tremendous. I feel really
I'm afraid that our valley, we're all change is always hard for people, and we're fearful of change, but the valley will not, it will come. It is coming back. We're having our fiestas, we're having our rodeos, our children are graduating from high school. The church is having its ceremony. The basics are there, but there is a change, and there will be a change. It will not be the same, because it is a community that has a tight relationship with the land, and the land is not the same. We'll adapt to it. We all will. We'll figure it out, but it will never be exactly the way it was. And Anita's right. We could learn from this. I will say, though, there are some people, and these conversations have gone on every time I've gone out there, that are pretty bitter about what happened. It was caused by the federal government. It has changed our
It's
place.
the dumbest controlled burn in the world.
Yeah.
I actually went by it. It was windy. We were in drought conditions. I drove past and they had a big sign up saying, "Don't call this in, it's a controlled burn." And I thought, who in their right mind would have considered doing this? So I drove by the day they lit it and thought, you got to be kidding me. And okay, so that's history, can't change what had happened, but going forward, maybe we just needed some more grasslands for our elk, Kathy.
Well, I guess.
Kathy.
And our elk and deer herds. Yes.
What about the rest of
and I
forest
just-
animals? What about the little animals, the rabbits, which
Oh,
of course
honey.
have been a
Wild
mainstay of food
turkey.
for
I
local
had 3
people, for
bears. Oh, yes. And
bears.
I had 3 bears on my
We're
land.
seeing
I
them
had a
everywhere.
juvenile. Yeah, and wild turkeys. One morning I'm sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee. There goes turkey and the little baby turkeys going across the road. I'm like, thank God the dogs are in the house and don't hear them or see them. But it's
The
you know.
animals forgot that there was a fire.
Yeah.
Now, the
They're
good
just-
news on that, when I was out there in September, yes, there are elk, and I get reports from folks working out there. Kathy, you've got elk back on the land. They're back on the land. Of course, they don't have my apple trees to eat the apples off of now, but I guess they're surviving on something else. Haven't heard about any bears. My eagles are probably back up on the top. You know, that area, I mean, it's an emotional thing because that area is just like a paradise to us that fall in love with those valleys. And so there's some coming back. I've known people, Anita and I have both been out there for the same amount of time, and these folks will make do with what they've got to make do with. But I will tell you now, we've all learned some lessons, and we've also learned, and I hate to say this, you cannot trust your own federal government and what they tell you. We've learned that the hard way, and we're fighters.
Everybody will
I was gonna say,
agree
yeah.
with you on
I mean,
that
you know,
one
we
right
were
now.
kind of naive, you know, we have distrust. I'm a Southerner. We always distrust the government. You know, we were kind of naive and we said, well, they're going to do right. They're going to, you know, they've allotted $4 billion. Well, we all lawyered up because nobody can get any money. So let's just
if I can quickly add to that, Kathy. So my husband and I had backup. We had a generator. We had solar lights in the windows. I have freeze-dried food. We were all just fine till our house burned down because we didn't have electricity for two weeks. And we're like, oh, well, okay, we'll go work on this. And well, it's a reprieve from the internet. That's fine. I guarantee you right now, we have a backup water catchment system again. The guy just up from us, he didn't have any of this, was not connected to folks in Mora. He was getting water out of our pond to boil for his mom to drink for the 2 weeks that we didn't have any electricity before the fire came. And if you left Mora, you couldn't come back. So it was like, in a way,
That's right.
martial law. So I had a bee sting or a wasp sting. My leg, my friend said, looked like it was about to actually explode. And there was no ice in town. All the stores were shut down. There was one gas station that they kept open to do first responders. But if I would have gone to the clinic, I couldn't come back to my house. And then if I can't come back to my house, I can't help my neighbors that have left their animals here. So it's not just like you had an electrical fire and you lost your house. It was a whole crazy scenario. And I do think every single time that I listen to the news, what these people are going through when they don't have water, they don't have food. So many countries there, but we had that in our small little town in Mora.
Yeah, exactly. I think
we're
we've all.
I want to just say a couple of things because it is getting close to time, but if we go, that's okay. You know, we maybe we'll be having another conversation like this. I appreciate so much all that you've said, but I would like to touch on one connection with the museum, because I did notice when I was reviewing the FEMA website today um, for the Hermit's Peak Cap Canyon fire process, and we will give some websites in just a moment, that this final rule designation that has happened and extending certain benefits, and one of them has to do with the mental health issues, like they're acknowledging how traumatic this was for people and that there will be ongoing problems. And I know that in terms of communities, so all museums want to be an integral part of the community. And here at Millicent Rogers, we're really making some big strides in being community centered and listening to the voices of our communities. And so I know it's certainly not on the level of needing food to eat or firewood for heat or a roof over your head, but the cultural sector is one of those places. So here's my little story. During the fires, because Taos experienced that too, we couldn't even see that mountain that's behind Sarah right now from our museum. And so yes, to the whole region experienced this in its own way. I had firefighter come in one day. I didn't know it. He came to me and said he was from Vermont. He was in town fighting the fires and he just needed a break. So he came to the museum. I thought that was, very interesting and heartwarming. And I guess I want people to know that museums are places that can offer comfort and just in any number of life circumstances. Also, Kathy can attest to that. She and I both don't know. It's like, why did you get up knowing you needed to go to the Millicent Rogers Museum that morning? I don't know, but we connected for sure. So, and going forward, I know something's going to emerge. It already has through a couple of exhibitions we've done, the artwork that's going to come from these experiences through the hands of the artists that lived through it, that saw it. And I know that probably artworks were lost, but people are also, that's a healing modality. So if you want to speak to that.
Anita and I both were artists, and I lost a group of oil paintings. I had just done a show in Las Vegas, New Mexico, and for the first time, I left my paintings. And Anita has lost her whole studio. But Anita and I have already started creating. I am pulling things out of piles of burned metal and trying to figure out how to fabricate. And I know Anita has already been working on items. So we'll see what we come up with. There's no telling. I have a background in sculpture. So I go up and drag things out of my house site and say, I'm going to put this with this, I think I'm going to, and it's become kind of like a form of therapy, to be honest, which art I think is a form of therapy. I know Anita can probably address that and what she's been doing too. So we'll see what we come up with, huh? Who knows?
Well, I think on that note, we've pretty much said it all, that the art does have a great deal of role in saving lives, and just the art of living in your area is an extraordinary thing most of us never get to experience. But then creating out of it, you girls are part of the phoenix out of the ashes. So thank you.
So we want to give those websites real quick.
Yes,
Sorry to interrupt you,
please,
Sarah. But and then I'll let you close it out. I want to thank everybody. I want to thank you, Sarah, for moderating. I do want to say that the museum's on winter hours, November through March. So we are closed on Wednesdays. We're open Thursday through Tuesday from 10 to 5. And if people want to help or donate to the families, the people in Mora, they can go to the Center for Southwest Culture.org or Santa Fe Community Foundation, santafecf.org. You can give through those two organizations at this time of year. I think it's, especially important. We're all being grateful and taking stock in what we have. And as Anita has pointed out, with all the circumstances in the world, there are certainly people worse off than us. So pulling together as a community, just wanting to get the voice out there that there are still people in need in Mora.
Yes.
Due to the fires. So thank you for coming, and I'll let Sarah close it out and say goodbye.
Well, we are simply awed by your experience. We in Colorado, having experienced a huge fire on literally on New Year's, shortly before that, where over 1,000 homes were lost in the metropolitan area, but nothing like the experiences that you all have. And honestly, I don't see the spirit of helping and resilience here that you all are speaking of. I mean, people are helping, but this is a different community. You're so close knit. And I can't thank you enough for being willing to share your stories. And Anita, having been willing to share your husband and the other heroes who came, because indeed they are. They gave of their time, their energy, and it's amazing that no lives were lost in these gentlemen and ladies who did their best.
Okay,
so we thank you. And
Thank you.
And we hope that things get greener every day.
Thank you.
Bye.